Welcome, everyone, once again to the Train Aid podcast. This is our podcast number 8, and this is an introduction to the new Level 5 Diploma in Teaching, the DIT course. So welcome, my name's Nick Chadwick, and with me today on today's podcast, we have Nathan Rogan, who's kindly joined us from the Education and Training Foundation. Nathan, how are you doing first of all?
Great, thanks, Nick. Yeah, all good up here. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us with the podcast today. So here is our agenda. So we're going to look at the Level 5 Diploma in Teaching course. We're going to really outline who the qualification is for, what's required, the entry requirements. We're going to have a look about the different evidence, what's involved, and the hours required to complete the qualification. So we have come up with 20 questions in total. And myself and Nathan are going to be going through each one of those questions one by one and just helping for the viewers out there to understand a little bit more about each of the questions and what's required for the qualification. Nathan, just before we start, are you okay just to introduce yourself and just a little bit about your role, if that's okay?
Absolutely, yeah. So my role at the Education and Training Foundation is the Senior Education Advisor for Initial Teacher Education, alongside English and ESOL. Prior to starting at the Education and Training Foundation in 2021, I worked at a college in the Northwest. I was Programme Leader for our PGCE and Cert Ed courses. I delivered on the PGCE, the Cert Ed. We had a Level 3 award in education and training, which I designed and delivered during COVID in a interesting hybrid model. I don't miss that style of teaching. And I was quality manager and quality improvement leader at the college as well. Before that, I was an English and ESOL teacher. So I've worked in FE for just coming up to, in fact, just over 10 years now. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Nathan, and it's great to have you today. So we're just going to jump straight into the podcast then. And the first question is, what are the entry requirements of the Level 5 Diploma in Teaching, the DIT? Nathan, I just wondered if you could just provide us with just some information just on the entry requirements if someone was looking to undertake this qualification.
Absolutely, yeah. Might it be useful for me to just give a quick summary of the diploma in teaching as well, just a bit
Yes,
of background
please.
context? Yeah. So awarding organisations and higher education providers are now using the diploma in teaching. It's the diploma in teaching, and in brackets you'll see FE and skills framework to create qualifications, and the first teaching of those has now commenced as of September 2024, and this is superseding the Diploma in Education and Training, which was known as the DET. So quite similar wording. So it's really important to be able to recognise the two. If people are out there looking to do such a teaching qualification, it's really important to recognise that the Diploma in Teaching is now sort of superseded the DET. And organisations might still be delivering the Diploma in Education and Training, but what's important to recognise now is that the Diploma in Teaching is the one which is eligible for funding. So if you're going to go to a university and do this qualification, it would need to be the Diploma in Teaching to draw down that student funding. And qualifications produced under this framework. So the Diploma in Teaching is a framework. Basically, if you're going to go to a higher education provider, it might not be called a diploma in teaching. So this is the framework on which teaching qualifications for further education and skills of level 5 and above are developed around. So if it's a level 5, they're often called a Cert Ed or a certificate in education. If you go into a HE provider at this point, or a college which delivers on behalf of a HE provider, you should be reassured that that university will have updated their qualification to be in line with the diploma in teaching. If it's level 6, often called a PGCE, Professional Graduate Certificate in Education. And if it's level 7, that's a Postgraduate Certificate in Education, sometimes called a Postgraduate Diploma in Education. There's lots of names in the FE and skills sector for these qualifications, so it can be slightly confusing, I think. So just be aware that there's different names for different things, that you want to be looking for the diploma in teaching, really, and qualifications that are aligned to that. So yeah, I just thought it was hopefully useful to give a little bit of an update on that, and just to explain sort of how things work in terms of that. But in terms of the entry requirements, it's two main things, to be honest. So it's an ability and a demonstration to study at level 5 or above. And generally that will come in the form of a diagnostic and initial assessment on interview. So if I take my own experience, we do sort of a spoken interview, a writing task. We'd look at, background qualifications, etc., to determine that ability to study, and have achieved level 2 in both maths and English. But all other entry requirements are set by the provider themselves in conjunction with whoever the awarding organisation or higher education provider might be.
Thank you so much. And I think, as you said there, it is a robust qualification. So therefore, an initial assessment such as a phone conversation is absolutely key there, just to really sort of outline the qualification and the structure and what is involved. Well, the second question, you have answered it. So we're just looking at English and maths level 2 qualifications. So is this required? So when you begin the course, do you need to have your English and maths as a level 2 as a minimum or above?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if we rephrase the question slightly as to why it's required. So
Yeah.
I think it's important that all the trainees have the skills to support the learners. So basically in both English and maths across their subject specialisms, so regardless of the training route, really. And it's just ensuring that the DiT, so the Diploma in Teaching, the DiT, is aligned with that standard required at the end of the Learning and Skills Teacher Apprenticeship. So that's what all of the DiT is underpinned by, the occupational duties and occupational standards of the Learning and Skills Teacher Apprenticeship. So previously, you'll have seen the DET being aligned to the professional standards. They'll still very often be incorporated, but one of the big changes is that the DiT is aligned to those occupational standards of the level of the Learning and Skills Teacher Apprenticeship. So quite a shift there in some respects. But really, it's up to delivery organisations to determine those English and maths qualifications that they'll accept at level 2. And it's important then to check which are eligible for QTLS if you do want to pursue QTLS. So there's a big list on our website, which you can have a look at. Generally, most organisations would probably ask for a GCSE minimum grade 4/C or level 2 English and maths. But I know, most organisations will accept an IELTS minimum grade, generally around the 6.5 for English. So it's definitely worth checking and aligning that with what's eligible for a QTLS.
Absolutely. So I think for any new teacher joining the DiT, it's very important they do find those certificates, especially as you mentioned, GCSE grade C or above. If they can find those, then that's going to really help them, not just for this qualification, but also maybe moving on to QTLS as well, because that is one thing that they do need to have.
Definitely, yeah. I know they can be a bit difficult to dig out the folders and boxes, can't they? But if you need to order, a replacement, it's probably just sensible to do so. It's going to save you a lot of hassle in the long run, especially then when you're going out to apply for teaching jobs. It's likely that they're going to want to see that.
Of course, absolutely. That's great advice. Thank you, Nathan. Question number 3 is just looking at the hours for the qualification. So what are the guided learning hours and the total qualification time roughly for this qualification? So if anyone was looking to embark onto this course, what advice would you say is the guided learning hours for this?
Yeah, so it's a minimum of 1,200, so 1,200 hours total qualification time. That factors in everything. So that does factor in sort of assignment time and things like that. So that's not just all the time that you're going to spend in a classroom. But the framework itself recommends a minimum of 360 guided learning hours. So that's the sort of the teaching and the doing, really. That's what you'll be spending within the learning environment, generally to speak, or, you know, on placement.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so once again, a robust teaching qualification is the level 5. So just going back to the initial assessment, it's good to have those initial talks with the provider just to outline the amount of hours that's involved, the amount of work.
Yeah, definitely. And I should say, sorry, just to go
Yeah,
back
of course.
on myself there, I just said the 360 guided learning hours, and I mentioned placement. The placements in addition to those 360 guided learning hours, obviously. That's the study time, really.
Of course.
And the teaching time, yeah.
Thank you. Just in regards to the teaching placement, so many different candidates do approach us and they say, what teaching placement do I need to enroll onto the course? Do I need to be working in a school, a college, a further education setting? I just wondered if you could just maybe just explain a bit about the teaching placements for anyone looking to do the level 5 DIT.
Yeah, you don't need to be working in any of those environments to do the course.
Okay.
You can, you know, you could be working anywhere in order to enroll onto the course. The idea is that following the course, you know, you'll go on to work in a further education and skills environment. It might be helpful if you approach the provider with a placement already secured. But generally, you know, your IT provider will work with learners themselves to find those suitable placements upon enrollment, or sort of within the first few weeks of enrollment. I know for myself, I wasn't working in any teaching environment when I enrolled. I was actually working in VHS, and then I moved into I did my course at University of Bolton. So they sourced me a placement within about, I think within about 4 weeks or so at the university, well, Salford College. So yeah, it happens within enrollment, sort of that first few weeks, but there's no reason why you couldn't source that yourself and approach the provider if you did want to do it in a particular place. It saves everybody a job then of finding that placement for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In regards to the next question is, how many teaching placement locations are required? So question number 5 is just looking at the different placement locations.
Yeah, so the DIT does stipulate that the teacher trainee should gain experience in a minimum of 2 teaching locations, and that's really to ensure that breadth of teaching practice experience. The placement and practice are really integral to becoming a high quality teacher, so the main placement must really provide those sufficient teaching hours in the trainee's subject area. The second placement should be for at least 20 hours, and it doesn't specify that these are teaching hours. They can be, but they don't have to be. But they should be at a different provider to really provide that real breadth of experience. But in extremists, so sort of those real circumstances where you can't source a second placement, it could potentially be a different subject area within the same provider or in a different venue within the same provider. But bear in mind, it doesn't have to be teaching hours. So it could, we'll talk about what constitutes these hours in a later question. But it is important to get those minimum of 2 different locations. To be honest, the more locations that you can access gives you more variety of experience. So I do think it is a really important part of the placement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be like a partnership, like school or a college, for example, where you can go and teach a different subject there, or even within your organization, you could actually, you know, teach in a different department, perhaps, or simply teaching a second subject. So it shows you're, you know, perhaps stepping out of your comfort zone and giving perhaps a new subject a go. You're delivering something which you probably need to research and read up on, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it is recommended that be a totally different environment altogether. So if you take, say it's a college, it would be a different college altogether.
Yep.
Just to do that. So, you know, if you're on a placement and there's lots of different people on that placement, it shouldn't be too tricky to do some swap over between, the two people, etc. But in those circumstances where that's really not possible, it can be within the same provider itself. Yeah, that's right, Nick.
I understand. Thank you so much. The next question is number 6, is all about the teaching hours. So how many teaching hours should be logged for the level 5? How many hours in total?
So the placement's at least 250 hours in duration. And as part of that, at least 150 of those hours should be teaching practice.
Yeah.
So it's at least 150 hours of teaching. Of those 150 teaching hours, at least 100 hours must be in that trainee's subject area. So it could be all of the hours, but at least 100 hours of those must be in the trainee's subject area. So whatever they're specialising in. And how many should be logged? 150 hours should be logged. Yeah. If they go over that, that's okay. They don't have to log anything over that. But that other 100 hours, so when we say 250 hours overall, those are the activities that go on around the teaching itself. And again, I know we'll come to that question to give a list of what those are. So yeah, it's at least 150 hours should be logged as part of a 250 hour teaching placement.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So with the DIT, it's not just solely about the teaching, it's about those other responsibilities as well, which we'll come on to shortly. Thank you so much. A common question we always get asked is, what are the recommended class sizes? So for anyone looking to go on to the level 5 teaching course, they always say, what's the minimum number of learners that I need to be teaching? So I just wondered, do you have any advice on the recommended class sizes?
Yeah, so there's not a recommended class size as such, but it wouldn't be acceptable to complete a DiT teaching only one-to-one sessions. So the placements really should give trainees experience of practice in a range of classroom settings and environments, with that experience of different group sizes, in my opinion, being a really helpful part of developing practice. So, when I was teaching, I'd have groups as small as sort of 4 or 5 up to 25 if it was, maybe a GCSE English group. So it does give you that real experience of different group sizes. However, it's worth noting that in the majority of the observations as part of the DiT, so the teaching observations, the trainee should be teaching a group of at least 10 learners. So in the majority, that's 6. At least 6 of those teaching observations, you will need at least 10 learners.
I think that's great advice as well. I think that to really foster and improve your own teaching skills, in my opinion, it is good to be teaching to quite, like as you say, large numbers. Like from your own experience in teaching to 25 learners, with an English group, I think that's a really good thing. So if there is an opportunity to teach to large class sizes, why not? I think it's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
That would be
definitely.
my personal advice for any potential teacher, is to really sort of take you out of your comfort zone and really sort of, if you have that opportunity, then do teach to large class sizes. As you say, it's going to help you, especially when it comes to the observations as well.
And it's going to help you as well when you go out into I suppose,
Yep.
your first role. It can be quite daunting if you've never done it before, stepping into a large group. And
Yep.
the reality is, in colleges and different adult community education, prison education, etc., you might have some very large class sizes. You might also have some very, 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 very small class sizes, depending on the nature of the group, etc. So, yeah, and I think it's also worth noting, if you are just going off topic slightly, if you're teaching like quite a practical subject, so let me
Yep.
just think of, let's say, automotive as an example. You might do some of those sessions in the workshop, but it's really important as well to get that classroom experience too, that mix of both. So I think with a really practical subject, I teach English and ESOL, so all of mine were in the classroom. But where you generally work in a workshop, it shouldn't be the case that you do all of your observations in a workshop. You need to get that classroom experience and that learners sat down in a room, whatever you're doing in that classroom, as part of that. So not just workshop, but that combination of the two, yeah, I hope that's helpful as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, no, I agree totally. So if you're teaching a practical subject, you know, it's nice to have a blend of both practical lessons and also theory as well. So being in that classroom, you know, teaching to learners sat behind a desk, it's
Yeah.
only going to really foster your confidence, your experience as well. So I think that's absolutely key to have a variety of different observation formats. Absolutely. Just moving on to question number 8 then. So how many non-teaching practice hours should be logged? I know we covered this slightly before. Um, so I just wondered if you could just outline this sort of new area of non-teaching practice. So we'll have a look at this in the next couple of questions. But how many hours, how many non-teaching practice hours should be logged by the candidates?
Yeah, so it's not mandated, but it's helpful if they log that additional 100 hours of activity. Yeah, so
Of
it's
course.
100 hours, isn't it, on top of the 100 teaching, 150 teaching hours.
Yeah.
So you have 100 hours on top of that, which could be teaching, but they don't have to be. So that's non-teaching practice. But I think it's helpful to log those. As I say, it's not
Yeah,
mandated, but it gives a real good idea of how you're spending your time when you're not teaching on the other
of
tasks that I
course.
know we're going to come on to. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the next question just follows on really. So what activities can count as the non-teaching practice hours? So what type of activities are likely to be seen on one of the teachers' non-teaching practice logs?
Yeah, so these can be activities. So this isn't an extensive list, but it's things such as team meetings,
Mm,
planning time. So think about that planning time when you're doing that. Um, Interviews, it might be interviewing learners for courses,
of course.
assessment meetings, observations, like where you're observing another teacher teaching.
Mm,
Um, or like provider-wide sessions. So your CPD days, your training events and things like that. So it can be anything really. It's all the stuff that goes on outside of the classroom, which we know is a huge part of the profession. So
mm.
as much as what goes on in the classroom goes on outside of the classroom in preparing for those sessions, and just as part of being a teacher. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think for me, you know, my advice to any sort of teacher doing the level 5 is don't work in isolation. So don't feel as though you are, you know, you're solely focused just on doing your
Mm.
qualification. My advice is to immerse yourself within that within your organization, so within your college or wherever it might be. So get involved within team meetings, standardization activities, inset days. It could be open evenings as well. So
Mm.
all of those things are really going to help you become a much more of a holistic teacher, and you get an idea of kind of those monthly duties. It's not just about being in the classroom, it's about those extracurricular things, those clubs,
Yeah.
the additional responsibilities. Some are mandatory, some are optional. But I'd say really sort of, you know, get involved within those, and they all count towards the 100 hours.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Of course they do. Yeah. Any clubs, any sessions that go on outside of the classroom. Yeah. They would all count to those 100 hours. Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent, super. Just going to move on. So sort of a key question I saw is all about remote teaching hours. I just wondered how many remote teaching hours are required for the level 5,
Yeah, so 20 hours of live remote delivery should be included. So that's
of course.
specified as live remote delivery should be included.
Mm. And that would be on like Zoom or Teams or a platform like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, no problem at all. Excellent. And just the next question is all about the mentors or support mechanisms as well. So how many mentors should support me with the qualification, and what teaching qualifications should they hold? So in terms of like supporting someone who's new to embarking on level 5, who should be within that organisation who can help them?
So it is 2 staff
Two.
at
Yep.
their placement. So they should have the support of 2 staff at the placement alongside the support of the course tutor. So they would have the course tutor, the main tutor, who delivers, the teacher education qualification, the DiT, and then 2 support staff. So the first one of those is the subject specialist mentor. They'll be competent and teach the trainees subject area, and that really does enable that subject specific support. And that staff member will have the time to support the trainee for a recommended 30 minutes per trainee per week. So I know in my case, I used to have half an hour with my,
Yep.
well, at least half an hour with my my tutor. And additionally, they'll have that time to engage in assessment, particularly of the subject specific elements. So, maybe join in with some of those observations or doing some informal observations of the teaching. Mine was an ESOL expert, so if I didn't know my grammar, I'd get pulled up on that. When I was new to ESOL teaching, and I'd get a bit confused over some of the grammar points, so she'd always call me up on that. And then secondly, you'll have your local pastoral support mentors, providing that more general area of advice and support. So this mentor might support more than one trainee in a given placement setting. So they might have multiple trainees. And that mentor will have that time to support the trainee for the recommended 30 minutes per trainee per week. And that mentor as well is expected to work with the provider on those ongoing trainee progress reports. So this is keeping, almost like monitoring that progress as we're going along. Where the placement's small and those resources are quite limited, though, the IT provider staff can provide the pastoral mentoring role if enough time is allocated to it. So that could be the main sort of staff within that organisation. But I think really in terms of that last question, well, the last point, what qualifications should they hold? It's just really up to the provider to take that responsibility that all specialists and mentors who support the programmes have that sort of level of training recommended. Trainees shouldn't be expected to find their own mentor. That's definitely worth pointing out. They need to be provided by the college or university. I think the provider really should be identifying, training, supporting the mentors in that role. There are qualifications that the mentors could do, but that's to be decided by the provider themselves. Yeah.
Of course, thank you so much. I remember years ago when I did my teacher training, I always found that just a 30-minute chat every week, just over a tea or coffee with my mentor was key to helping me keep on track with my own sort of teacher training studies, as well as like balancing my teaching hours as well. So I'd say really do make the time to have those sort of weekly check-ins and chats with a mentor. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Just moving on to the lesson observations. How many lesson observations are required for the new level 5 qualification, please, Nathan?
Yeah, so it's 10.
10 in total.
Yep.
Wonderful. And that could be obviously a blend of like classroom, practical. So it's very much down to the individual really with how they sort of structure it and the format that they choose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think if just bearing that in mind, if it is that
course.
workshop environment, make sure that you have a combination of classroom and workshop as part of that. You wouldn't want to do all of your observations in the workshop. You should really be having that combination of the two.
Absolutely. So, for example, like a PE teacher, for example,
Yeah.
We would sort of say to them, please be mindful not to have 10 observations, which are all practical. So, if you've got like 10 observations in a sports hall delivering a practical session, would say that's probably not the right route to go down. You really need to have a blend. So being in the classroom and teaching, for example, A-level PE. So it's going to really help you to make yourself much more of a well-rounded teacher, I would say.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Totally agree.
Perfect. And in regards to the length of the observations, what is the minimum length of the observation? for each one?
So minimum is 45 minutes, yeah, but they could be longer than that, but the minimum is 45 minutes.
Absolutely, yeah. So minimum of 45 minutes. What my advice is, try and go for an hour, but it depends, with obviously the structure of the day. Some organizations, they have like 45 minutes, and that's absolutely fine to go with that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just moving on to number 14. Can any of the observations be conducted remotely, so via Zoom or Teams? So I'm just wondering if any can be done remotely.
Yeah, so the guidance is that up to 2 observations may be live remote delivery, and that on top of that, 1 other session may also be observed remotely. But there really needs to be appropriate arrangements made there for prompt feedback and discussion. It's really, though, it's suggested that it's up to 2. So
Yes.
trying to keep it to 2, really. There is concession for a third, as long as feedback is very prompt and discussion follows that quickly. But yeah, try them for no more than 2.
I understand. Thank you so much. And our next question is just looking at the core units, the different units involved within the qualification. Just wondered if you could just give the viewers a little bit more information about what units are involved within the qualification, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the 5 suggested core units, I'll do a little breakdown of each just to give a bit of a flavour of what they are. So unit 1 suggested to be teaching my subject. Now, different providers will give these different names and might deviate slightly from this because, as I say, the suggested core units, but different providers might vary these slightly, and
Of course.
may vary the name slightly as well. So the suggested, though, is unit 1 being teaching my subject. So these are things like curriculum development, threshold concepts, troublesome knowledge, that real pedagogic content knowledge, as well as things like embedding maths and English, subject expertise, ensuring that maintaining that through things like CPD and industry practice, sustainability in your area, and progression advice. So that real sort of core around teaching the subject that you've chosen to teach. Unit 2, this is broken into 2 parts. So this is learners and learning. So part A, learners, includes things like getting to know your learners in FE and their journeys, how they got into FE, the range of support needs required, as well as safeguarding and EDI points. Your English and maths abilities of learners, just as an IT classroom will have different standards of English and maths. The trainees placement will also see classrooms with that. So thinking about those English and maths abilities, and learners' wider expectations joining a course. And then learning is broken into more of that, some of those real contemporary learning theories, things around neuroscience, role and currency of research and evidence, theory to practice, so applying that theory into practice, and encouraging learners to be independent and aiming high. Then we've got unit 3, and again, this has 2 parts, so it's teachers and teaching. So the teacher part includes things like, the role of a teacher and what makes a good teacher, working with and learning from other teachers. So, probably observing other teachers, and that's what you were saying really, Nick, not just working in isolation, trying to get good experience all around, and any other sources of support. And then the teaching is things like rigorous curriculum thinking and that real person-centered approach to teaching, planning, delivering sessions, resources to meet learner needs, individual support, sort of teacher expectations of learners, and that can include things around classroom management as well, which I think is always a big one, isn't it, when you're going into teaching?
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Face-to-face and remote teaching, assessment feedback, and maths, digital and English, embedding those into your sessions. Unit 4, this is your professional practice, and this has 3 parts. So I won't break these down too deeply. So part A is your teaching practice. So these are things like micro teaching, preparation for placement, observing others, teaching in a team and teaching on your own. So doing those team teaches with maybe an already experienced teacher or another trainee teacher. Curriculum planning, conducting assessment more widely. So really, exploring that sort of process of teaching practice. Part B of that is being a professional. So these are things like the occupational standards, you're developing your expertise and updating your CPD so that you're current with your subject area, your professional responsibilities, status, so that links to, QTLS and our professional standards, and working with colleagues in a respectful way. And then finally, part C is the FE and skills sector more broadly. So an overview of what the sector is. You'll know, Nick, it's a hugely diverse sector. Without doubt, the most diverse sector of education. Learners ranging from 14 onwards, basically. In some cases, many cases, it's 16 plus. But you do get those occasional examples where it's 14 plus as well. The different types of programs there, timetables, contracts, etc., government policy, and that wider support. And then Unit 5 is effective digital and online pedagogies. So that is what it is really. Personal digital skills, educational technology, AI, AR, VR. So, those are really becoming parts of teacher education and education more widely. You might even be using some artificial intelligence in planning, depending which, provider you're with. They might be using some of that as part of their assessment, seeing how you can use AI to plan lessons and, really analysing that. And digital delivery as well, and how that's probably, a lot's changed since sort of 4 or 5 years ago. A lot's changed since the pandemic now as well. Real sort of shift to online delivery and now to different forms of working online and digital delivery. So that really does break down those sort of core units. But just to give a bit more background to that, because this probably is one of the biggest questions, really. It really is up to the awarding organisations and higher education providers to set that fine detail and phasing of how these units might look. So if you were to listen back to this podcast and think, well, my course isn't following this pattern, it's suggested. So what is worth thinking about is that subject-specific focus of Unit 1, so that teaching my subject, really will continue across the programme. So that's really central to the whole overall teaching qualification. And then you have your optional units on top of these as well. So these aren't prescribed for qualifications, but if you're doing sort of a program that has a particular emphasis on a certain part of the FE sector, mine had an ESOL focus. So there was definitely options within that, and I did units that were more geared towards ESOL teaching and some aspects of that. So you might have some of those optional units in there as well.
Thank you so much. And I did have a question just about the remote teaching side. I know that candidates need to log 20 hours. If they are really struggling to deliver any like remote teaching, is there sort of any advice for that if they're really struggling to teach on Zoom or Teams or a remote platform? Is there any sort of advice or anything that they could do differently at all?
Yeah, I think about in those cases, where might you be able to offer, as part of those hours, smaller groups extra support. So it might be that, you've got some learners who are really sort of struggling with a specific aspect of a course, and it might be that you're then able to provide some online sort of small, I wouldn't really recommend online one-to-one sessions. That's not, I wouldn't really recommend that. But smaller group sessions where you're able to target some additional learning, because it is the case that a lot of courses now don't really get delivered online. They've gone back to the classroom, but where you're able to, maybe the provider is able to give you some time to provide that extra support for some groups, that'd be a really good thing to do. Even it's 20 hours. If you were thinking about doing an hour every couple of weeks or so, it'd add up. It does add up. So yeah,
no problem. Thank you so much. We'll just move on to question 16. What is the 30-minute professional discussion on this course?
So yeah, that's part of the final assessment process, and that will just involve a 30-minute professional discussion. That professional discussion is between you and the tutor, and it can be really around any aspect of professional practice. So anything at all around your teaching, it might be around planning, just anything at all that involves professionalism within, this role. It might be, thinking about how, going back to some of those units, if you're really focusing on that part B of Unit 4, being a professional. You've got different points around there: developing expertise, updating your CPD, how you've worked with colleagues, and linking that to the classroom practice that you've been doing. It really is just a 30-minute discussion, professional to professional, around that sort of whole experience that you've had as, throughout the diploma in teaching.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a chat next about the actual assessment for the DIT, and what else constitutes the assessment for the DIT qualification.
Yeah, so first of all, the qualification requires, all trainees to pass all modules
Of course. Yeah.
through assessment, except the professional practice modules. So these modules require the candidates to, so you'll be, as well as the 10 observations, so you have to get your 10 observations, show evidence of all your practice hours alongside those 10 observations. So that's why it's so important to log those hours. Do them as you go. I say don't try and do them at the end. Do it every week. Update it every week. Just keep on top of it. Otherwise, it's easy to forget. And then the other thing will be a portfolio of evidence relating to the placements. Now, this will really be set by the provider themselves as to exactly what they want to see as part of that evidence. And that will be submitted to the module assessors. So you'll be asked to complete that portfolio of evidence. And then, as well as that, you'll get your final assessment with your 30-minute professional practice discussion that we just talked about. And that portfolio, just to talk about that a little bit more, that's really to demonstrate how the candidate has met those occupational standards in the professional practice, and that needs to be countersigned by the course tutor, so it does need to be signed off. The professional discussion as well, that should be conducted in person, not online, in person, by 2 people who hold a full teacher qualification. So it will be a discussion with 2 professionals, and then they'll be able to discuss how you've done as part of that discussion.
Wonderful.
But I should think that there'd be more than 30 minutes worth of stuff to talk about by that point as part of a professional discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. A key question is, how long does the level 5 DIT take to complete? So just in terms of like the average learner, so embarking on this qualification, how long would you say the average learner takes to complete the level 5?
Yeah, so it's most often done over 1 year if studying it full time, and 2 years when studying it part time. Those are the most common 2 methods of delivering it and studying this course. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think as well, like just with like balancing your teaching hours, your studies, is a good thing, as well. So once again, just with the with regular meetings, I think it's a good thing to meet with your mentor as well, just to keep on track. Wonderful.
Definitely, yeah. We used to offer it exclusively over 2 years at the college I worked at. That was the only way that we offered it, but I personally did mine over 1 year. So just,
of course,
it will depend. And if you want to do it over one or the other, obviously just check that the provider offers that model and that they don't just offer one or the other.
I see, no problem. Question 19 is sort of looking to the future. So where can I teach with the level 5 DIT? So when you come to the end of your course, you're looking at sort of jobs which are out there. So what areas can you go into?
Yeah, so obviously it's the level 5 diploma in teaching, and then in brackets further education and skills, and it's aligned to those occupational duties of a further education and skills teacher. So it's really designed for teaching within that sector. So colleges, independent learning providers, sometimes ILPs, adult education providers, which are often community education providers, or sometimes run by councils or local authorities. It might be in prison education. It's all of that world of further education and skills. Yeah, so really sort of thinking about that sector and those learning environments.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And the final question is, what are the progression areas? What are the progression of areas? Start again. What are the progression areas are available after the level 5 DIT?
Yep. So this level 5 DIT obviously allows your learners to, well, learners or yourselves to complete QTLS, which is that period of professional formation. I know that you said that you did it, Nick. I did it too. And that can be completed with SET, and that's outlined in our other podcast. And that really is that main area of progression. Once you've done this, if you want to sort of get QTLS afterwards, and you want to do that, that period of professional formation, this qualification will allow you to do that. You don't have to do QTLS. It's not mandated. Yep. You don't have to do it. If you don't do it, that's your choice. What comes later, once you've been teaching, I think it's for a minimum of 5 years that you get the opportunity to then complete advanced teacher status as well. So that's one of our other programs, which that gives you chartered teacher status. So not too many people have that. So it's quite it's quite a rigorous period of formation is ATS. So thinking sort of forward into a bit further forward into your teaching career, that's the option for you.
Absolutely. So definitely. So QTLS, or in the future ATS, advanced teacher status, and we do have a podcast for QTLS. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So that really has come full circle with the level 5 DIT podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, Nathan. Is there anything to add to the podcast, or any sort of further advice on anyone looking to embark on the level 5 at all from yourself? Any sort of further points of view at all?
Yeah, but I think what I would just say to finish on is, if you're thinking about teaching in further education and skills, it's a fantastically rewarding career. Provides variety, it provides challenge. There's no doubt it provides challenge, but it really does provide reward as well. And it's a hugely diverse sector with, a real range of different roles and teaching environments that you might want to work within. So it's a real good opportunity, whether you're thinking about making a switch from potentially having worked in an industry for a number of years, and you're thinking that you might want to share some of that knowledge now with others, or you're just finishing university yourself and you're wondering what to do with the future. It's a really, really diverse and enjoyable sector, I felt, to work in, which is why I still work in, I suppose, 10 years on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nathan. That's excellent advice. And once again, thank you so much for joining me, Nathan. So I look forward to meeting you again on one of our future podcasts. But for myself and everyone here at Training, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.